There's a measurable productivity boost that you get when you can see someone else working as you're working, and you know that you can be seen. It's why study hall exists in college. It's nice to go down and work around other people. Try to incorporate a lot of those principles into what we built, as well as like Cal Newport's book Deep Work, where he talks about, hey, how do you really make time for the work that moves your life forward, and what can you do to protect that time, jealously guard it. And if you do that, you can, in a fewer number of hours, do the work you used to do over a longer period of time if you do focused deep work.
Hey guys, before we get started, I have one quick favor to ask of you. Can you please hit the subscribe button so that more people can find the show? Thank you. Since our first conversation, when you first told me about the TheSukha company, it was always in the back of my mind how important productivity must be for you.
Very true. Let me pick up on that. So there is definitely a line of thought which is about time. Oh, we spend so much of our lives working. It needs to be, right? And everyone says their thing like, do you realize over the course of your lifetime, you'll spend 42 years or, 60 billion hours? And it's quantified that way around time. So therefore it must be important. I don't dismiss that or diminish that. What I do feel is this, is that there is a great deal of satisfaction and joy that can be derived from work if a couple of things are true. And so whether we spend 60 hours or 60,000 hours over our lifetime working, how can we make that something that lifts us up, that gives us the feeling of self-fulfillment, that makes everything else in life feel better? I can expound upon that. Let's pretend that was just a really big dramatic pause.
That was a really long dramatic pause.
Okay. So picking back up, this is where you're like, Steven, possibly narcoleptic, but he's awake again. So let's hear what he has to say. So after a long dramatic pause, what I would say is this, is I have a deep belief that we do have something inside us that is great. We may or may not express that in this lifetime. We may find both the time, the dedication, the tools, and the opportunity, right, to do the thing of which we're capable. That could be writing the book that changes the minds of millions of people about something. That could be painting the artwork. It could be leading a nation. It could, whatever that thing is that you've sung your song, right? And I want to acknowledge that there's a very privileged sort of foundation of what I just said, which is there are some times, like my father's life, where he was raised in absolute poverty, and he worked very hard to get to a point where there was no question of will there be food today or will there be a place to sleep, right? So to do the thing that is great, it doesn't necessarily mean you wrote a Nobel Prize winning something, Now, that said, if we want to do something great and we have the opportunity to do that, there are tools and techniques that give us a greater chance of actually getting it out. And that is a very strong impetus for me to create those tools and share those techniques. And it's one of the things I loved when you and I were talking. You said, I think this could be really valuable to share, because I agree. I think there are some simple things you can do that give you a better chance of saying, wow, I feel like I'm in my lane doing the thing I'm great at, and it feels wonderful. And I want to share that.
Yeah, what I loved about that, especially when after our first conversation, it was about really stepping into your vision, stepping into your values in the work that you do. Because yes, we can be productive. Yes, we can be busy. We can run at 110% all the time. But if it doesn't align with what we value and what we enjoy doing, what's it all for? And I see that a lot in burnout, where people can say, oh, I was doing it because I wanted to achieve X, Y, and Z, but at what cost? And then when they feel that, or they don't meet that goal that they were striving for, and they said, oh, all this hard work, and for what? And for nothing. I was only striving for one thing. And then they completely dissociate from it. Or they say, look, I'm just going to leave my job and become a yogi. Or so I've come across this a few times, where they've left a job, went and started living this free, holistic life of becoming a yogi. And next thing, I got in touch with them 2 years later and was like, oh, I'd love to hear where you were. And then they're like, yeah, I tried being a yogi, but that didn't pay the bills. So I'm back in the office. And still resenting themselves for it. They still had the negative narrative that said, you
Yeah.
failed in the office, you left to become a yogi. You failed as a yogi because you couldn't pay the bills. So now, with that resentment, they returned to the office with that same energy that they had when they left.
Is this a dramatic pause? I'm going to step in.
This is a long dramatic pause because
Okay. So I'd love to pick up on a couple of things you said and sort of hang a lantern on them, because I know you talk a lot about burnout and how to understand it and how to overcome it, and about how to, live your life intentionally. And inside what you said, there are a couple of things. When you talk about, oh, I was living this office life and I went to go be a yogi thinking it would relieve me of these kind of burdens. I did that. I couldn't afford to pay my bills. I went back to this thing and I'm frustrated with myself for failing once, failing a second time, and now returning to my first failure, right? There's a lot in there that's just like negativity on negativity on negativity, because the way in which you frame that in your mind, right? The way in which you're saying, oh, well, I'm going to hop from this and that. I didn't work hard enough or properly to make either one work, as opposed to maybe a different way of framing that, which is, what have I learned from this that will allow that to be better? Or what have I learned from this that will allow this to be better, right? Because that's ultimately a choice of like, do I continue doing what I'm doing? Do I change? And I'll give you a very concrete example. I have been very lucky. I've raised $21 million of venture across 3 companies. One company, we raised 15. We had a successful exit when I was in my 20s, and that was about a 6x multiple. So it was relatively good for all of us. I took a couple of years off, traveled. I had 2 massive failures right after that, in my 30s, late 30s. And that was something where I was like, wow. But as they say, you can fail or you can learn from the failure. And I had this technique I developed, which sounds very old school, but when I had the moment with both of those companies that failed, where I said, okay, this is not going to go any further. I can't raise more money in good faith because I've tried what I thought would work. And if I raise more money now, it's just to continue doing the thing that didn't work, right? So I had to have those tough conversations with investors, with the team, with our partners to go, guys, I think we've taken this as far as we can. Once that was done, and I was living in a place of deep humiliation, shame, depression, both times I took a legal pad and a pencil, and I sat in this one chair in my old place in West Hollywood, and I wrote out to myself, what did I learn? What did I do wrong? While it was fresh, not a month later, not a year later, like, oh, I think I should have. No, in that moment, like, my foot hurts. What exactly hurt? My little toe, I think, is broken. I can tell because I step on it this way. It's very painful. In the future, I would have done this differently about how I kick a soccer ball, as opposed to like, remember when my foot hurt? Yeah, that really sucked. Oh, well, those opportunities really helped me with my next company, because that's how I created what I'm doing now, which I love. And it's really, with the TheSukha company, it's really about, hey, how do we create tools in a community of people who want to do something at a very high level and overcome burnout, feel like we're doing what we're meant to do, and do it in a reasonable period of time, right? Work should be what we get done, not how long did it take or where did we do it. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I like how you acknowledged the journaling the pain when you feel it, because a lot of people in that moment, they're complaining about, let's say, the world is going to end. Oh, I'm going to lose my foot or something like that. And then a month later, you're going to be like, oh yeah, it happens all the time. Oh yeah, as you said, I just kicked the ball wrong. And it's like, but it happens, or you shrug it off and it's like, oh, it happens all the time. I'm tough. But once you acknowledge the pain, and once you also, as you said, acknowledge where you went wrong, where you failed, so that you learn from that failure.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of looking at it through rose-tinted glasses a month or a year later, being like, oh yeah, I was young and dumb and things happen, and you kind of shrug it off, or it's not as painful as it was because you've grown in the meantime. Or maybe time has just passed and you've forgotten how that feels until you feel it again. But that's a very good point, what you said, to write it down when you feel it and acknowledge it for what it is also, because sometimes for me, especially when I speak up about these things, once I speak up about how I feel, it becomes more tangible because you have it out in
Yes.
the open. The next thing is like, you know what? I thought like the whole world was falling apart around me. But once I vocalized it, I was like, you know what? It's actually not that big of a deal. It's
Mhm.
actually the root of the problem. Once I talked it out, is like, oh, I can solve that. That's okay.
Yes.
It might be painful for a day, a week, a month, maybe, but I'll overcome that.
Wise words. I will tell you something, which is I know one of the things that I have to share is I have lessons and experience in film. I've been an executive at a couple film studio lots. I've been a vice president at Fox, executive vice president at DreamWorks for Kurtz and Morrissey, and I've also done technology companies. And something that I found very interesting is when I went into tech, I associated failure with the things that are true in film. Failure is not celebrated in film and TV. Failure is something that's really hard and it manifests in many ways. What meetings you get, who wants to hang out with you. It's a very transactional business, right? You have a success. Everyone wants to get you the best table at the restaurant, hang out with you all the time, do all the things, read all your scripts, right? You have a failure and suddenly there's a stink on you. And it's really, really hard to deal with. And I remember when I went and had that first failure with my little startup, and I felt that thing of like, oh my God, this is the end of my life. And what is a really interesting lesson was in Silicon Valley, if failure is really a learning opportunity, there's not a lot of stigma around it. Every major founder has had a couple failures behind them as they figured out what it is they were going to do or they pivoted, that sort of thing. And it really helped me understand, oh, if you frame failure as like, I'm going to take this opportunity to learn what I did wrong, then you go and you build on it. And investors can ask you, like when you do another company, they can be like, well, I saw that you tried this thing. What they're listening for is not, oh yeah, I suck, I was dumb, but to go, what I learned was that we weren't watching this metric. And going forward, I will always be attentive to this because that was in my blind spot before, but it's not anymore. And that's a great way to think about and talk about these things. And if I were to go back into film, it's definitely something that I would bring back to that, is that sense of like, I know, yes, my last movie sucked, but you know what I realized was when I got these kind of notes on it, I should have filtered out the notes that tried to make it like this other movie that it wasn't. But at the time, I didn't stand up for that thing. And now I would do that. It's like, oh, no, you're totally right. It was hard to add a romantic, a love interest to this thing when thematically it just didn't really fit. But the studio really wanted to put, Anna Kendrick in it or something.
Yeah, one and on that as well, where let's say you fail on projects in the past, or
Mm-hmm.
you fail on, let's say you thought a big opportunity, and next thing it fails, and it's like, it's okay, it's a failure, but it's a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say, as you said, moving from the film industry into something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, for me, it was people say, oh, well, you studied so hard for this degree, or you studied so hard for this job, and you spent so many years on this. Why would you ever leave it? You've put all of
Mm-hmm.
those years into that. And like for example, for me, I did a degree in quality management. So everyone thought,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're going to become a quality manager. And I was like, no, if anything, the one thing I learned from studying quality management was I never want to be a quality manager, but I have more respect for my quality manager and I know what's expected of my quality manager working in quality, so that I knew this is what I go to the quality manager for. This is what I don't go to the quality manager for.
Yeah.
And I also learned, okay, I like different aspects of teamwork, how I like to communicate, how I get my message across. These were skills, innate skills that are skills that you learn as you go, but they did not necessarily mean I had to stick in one field of study. It's like, no, this is something that you can carry into other areas of life. So I like, and I've met a lot of people who worked in they studied in like medicine, they've become doctors and dentists, they're working in
Mm-hmm.
healthcare, and then they say, oh, but I really hate the work I do. I really hate the industry. Oh, my boss is toxic and all this. And it's like, but I studied, like my parents put me through college. I've studied the last 10 years for this. I can't just give it all up. And it's like, well, you can either give it all up now and work towards something you enjoy, or you can spend the next 30 to 40 years working as a doctor and hating every minute of it.
Absolutely true. The sunk cost fallacy.
Yes.
Yes. It is very true. I do spend, as much as I laugh, I do spend a lot of time thinking about what are the things that bring me down? What are the things that I hate? And what's really underneath them? And I'll give you an example because I have been lucky to have been curious and have the opportunity to go into a number of fields. So I didn't hate film. I love technology. I've done things that are generally interesting to me. But something that I really get down on myself about is I procrastinate and I get overwhelmed. Usually this is related to distraction. And I'll tell you, because I run a community of focused people. I talk to a lot of people who are trying to focus, trying to overcome burnout, trying to overcome, the overwork. And the number one thing that I felt that I've found echoed in so many people, I was speaking to hundreds of people in our community, is this cold start problem in the morning, which I could synopsize to, I need to get going. I know I said start work at 9, 8:30, 9:30, whatever, right? And I look at my to-do list and I find my brain going to, oh, you know what? I could just throw in that load of laundry before I begin, or I could just let me check my emails real quick, or I pick up my phone and I scroll for just a minute. I'm just going to quickly, and do the dishes from last night, something like that. 15, 20 minutes go by and I haven't started the actual thing I need to do, right? And that's a problem. Also related to is I look at something on the list and I'm like, oh God, I don't even know where to begin. That's a hard one, right? When you dig down into that procrastination at the beginning, with almost everyone, you find that it's about overwhelm. And it's usually overwhelmed because the number of things that have to get done are ridiculous. You look at your list, there's 17 things that all do need to get done on some level, and you're staring at them. And there's no chance you're going to do 17 things right now. So it almost feels like incapacitating, just the knowledge of that. And it's one of the things like, with the platform that I built it so you can only see the top 3. Your smart assistant comes in and says, hey, let's start a session. In your session bucket, let's just choose the 3 things you're going to do. I'll hide the rest, focus on those, because there's the research that if you say I'm going to do 3 things and you can only see 3, you'll probably do 3. If you say I'm going to do 3 and you can see 17, you'll probably do 2. Just the way the brain works, right? When it feels like it can't achieve this thing, it proves it can't achieve. And the other overwhelming thing is when one of those items you carve out for yourself is something that's just not achievable right now. And it's that cold start, oh, I don't know where to do this. People will put down, oh, I need to, design the ad campaign for this fall. I need to write my book. I need to do things like that. You're not going to write your book between now and noon. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm not a scientist, but I'll tell you that's not going to happen. So having like an assistant says, hey, you know what, Eugene? I see, right, your book has been on your to-do list. What if we were to say in 30 minutes, you could outline chapter 1? That's when you start to get a place of like, oh, that's doable. I could do that. I had an idea for that when I was driving yesterday. I could bang that out in 30 minutes. And you start to get going. And that leads you over that hump of overwhelm, those little things, and help you start feeling so down on yourself. And at the end of the day, a very similar thing happens. I don't know if you've experienced this. I'm curious. I'll stop talking in a moment. But I also experienced the thing of like, man, I can't believe it's already X time. Where did the day go? Wow, I still have these things to do. I'll get up early tomorrow and get a jump on these before the day. And then you're promising yourself that tomorrow, not only will I do tomorrow's work, but I'll get early and do part of today's work. And, like dominoes, the days just kind of fall as they cascade one into the other. And that's not a reliable way to get your work done. And it leads to a feeling of being down on yourself. You're like, I suck. I don't get my work done. It goes into tomorrow. I go to dinner knowing I didn't finish my work. These are things that really have bothered me about me.
You're calling out my former self, so I could see a lot of what you said in how I used to behave in my last job, and that was literally me, 4 days a week, going to the gym. So I was working a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift. So the only and I hate going to the gym when it's busy in the evenings. So I said, there's only one fix for me, and that's finding a 24/7 gym and going before work. So I used to get up at 3 a.m., go to the gym before work, and then finish around 5 a.m., drive to work, then work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then in the evening, I probably had university work to do. Because I was studying part-time while working full-time, and it was chaotic. It got even more chaotic the following year when I still had this routine, And I took on one university course because I did not get accepted for the one I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, look, I'll take this 2-year course instead. And then after the first year of the first course, and I paid my fees for the second year, I finally got accepted for the course I wanted. But they said, oh, but you can't, let's say, do 2 courses at the same time with different colleges.
Right.
So I kind of just kept it quiet. And then I worked 2 university
You're
degrees
kidding.
at the same time while working full time. And I didn't tell anyone. Well, my manager knew about this. It was like, this is absolutely psychotic. You should not be doing
That is
this. I do
intense.
not recommend
Yes.
this. And it was intense. And I was like, just taking it in my stride, being this overachiever that I was. And it all came down to the final exams.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I knew karma was going to catch up with me, or was going to kick me in the head somehow. And the final exams for 2 courses, same day, same time,
Oh,
in the
wow.
same city, just at 2 different venues. And it was like just heavy breathing. And next thing I was like, just went up to my lecturer and won. And so for one degree, it was the final exam for everything. And for the other one, it was one module of 6. And I said, look, I just wanted one that was the final exam for everything. And I said, look, I'm just coming out here. And her jaw just dropped. I was like, what did you think you were doing? It's like, how do you think this is going to work? And I was like, look, can I just sit the deferral exam instead? And I was like, look, I don't even, at this point, I didn't care about, look, if I have to get a pass grade or not. I just want to sit the exam and do it and give it a go at this point, because I was so drained from doing the 2 of them at the same time. I just wanted to pass. And she was like, no, look, you can sit the deferral exam with the people who fail, of course, and try then, because
Okay.
this is an exceptional circumstance. And
Yeah.
then I sat the other exam, and I was like, the breath of relief at being like, why did I put myself through all of this,
Mm-hmm.
only for it to come to this moment where I could have lost it all, and let's say losing out in the course that I actually wanted. And even at the end of all that, when I finished those 2 courses while working
Yeah.
full time, I was off work for, I was finished university for 1 month, and I found myself scrolling. Okay, what's the next degree? What's the next university degree I want to do? What's the
Wow.
next thing I want to do part time to try and fill up that gap? Rather
Yeah.
than being like, oh, I should be like so relieved for all this extra free time I have in my evening. I was in that loop where I was like, I need to fill up this space again.
Why do you think that happens inside you?
I from my own self-reflection, the reason why I immersed myself in that work
Mm-hmm.
was because I did not want to deal with the overwhelming responsibilities for other things. Immersing
Mm-hmm.
myself into those degrees was really procrastinating on other things in my life rather than addressing the negative self narrative and the never being good enough and all of these emotions that were bottled up inside me. I was like, if I just immerse myself in more work and look productive and look successful and look this and that and look like the overachiever that sets the bar above everyone else, if I can seek that validation, I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to deal with these emotions. And that all caught up with me.
That is very self-aware. I'm really impressed.
Thank you. But it was something for me that was probably the most raw and uncomfortable part of it. Was, look, I have to be real with myself. I just have to just go through that ego death and be like, look, and maybe it's because I'm very logical as well. I'm like, and solution oriented for my work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
like, look, just get to the point. Don't draw out the emotions or how I feel about it. Just get to the point. Why do you
Mm-hmm.
think you're doing this? And it was just a very logical, structured approach to, and a systematic approach to breaking down
Mm-hmm.
what does this feeling mean, and why would you do this feeling, or and why would you carry on this action, and what's the result of that? And it was, and just by being very logical, it would make sense. Next thing, I'm like, okay, now write it down. And once I wrote it down, I was like, okay, now it looks very different. And even years later, because I had that story written down of, okay, this is the process I went through. This is why I was doing it. This was the result. And this is the next action I took. And then I videoed it and recorded myself doing that story. And then going back in the recording, I started filling in the gaps of where I noticed myself where I'd hesitate when telling that
Right.
story. And I was like, okay, there's something there. There's something niggling there
Right.
that I haven't
Yeah.
addressed. So it was kind of like a lot of self-therapy that way. Which very, very interesting. In my unbiased opinion, talking about myself.
Right, exactly. I'm leading a fascinating life. Let me tell you more. Yeah, well, I appreciate the amount of self-reflection that you've done. And I'm sure some of that has led you to want to create this podcast and give a platform to thinking through these ideas out loud.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I started the podcast, was
Mhm.
helping people to share their stories.
Yeah.
Because once I shared my story, even when it was just with myself,
Mhm.
that in itself was like a catharsis. It was like, okay, something that had been bottled up for so long, finally out in the open, and having that vulnerability, it left space for healing. And it took away that um, where people feel that they're giving away their power by being vulnerable with themselves and with others. It's
Mhm.
actually giving yourself a lot more space and strength, that no one can hold that against you. If it's not a secret that you don't want anyone to take control of,
Right.
then no one can take control of it. You're in control by how much you share and how much you're comfortable sharing. So by being that vulnerable, no one could hold that against me.
I love that. Okay, so what can I contribute? Because this is
Yes,
fascinating listening to you talk about the.
but this is what, when you told me about the TheSukha
Mhm.
community, it's, you're getting a lot of, let's say, like-minded people who want that area of focus, who
Yes.
wants to be productive, but as you said, they're procrastinating on the small tasks.
Mhm.
But you're also creating this community space. So from what I gathered, it was like, let's say, people meeting, let's say remotely, on, let's say,
Yes.
similar to a Zoom call. And from my experience, when I first started like writing, and I joined all of these coaching groups, and they were like, "Oh, let's just do a study session together."
Right.
And next thing, I was like, "Sure, I'll join one of these study sessions." And it was 20 people on a Zoom call, and then someone hit a bell, and the timer started for 20 minutes. And I was like, "What's everyone doing?" And I was just sitting there, and next thing I was like, okay, I'm just going to turn my camera off, started scrolling through Instagram, and next thing the timer went off, and then they're like, okay, what did you write? What did you write? And I was like, what is happening here? So first of all, I was clueless and completely like, didn't oblivious to what was going on. It was my first study session with them, and I was like, okay, I did not do any of the work. I had no idea where I was going to begin. So it
Right.
didn't work for me, probably because I didn't get the concept. But
Mhm.
what you described with Sukha, and you're definitely the better person to explain it here. What do you get in the Sukha community to help people to be more productive in that space?
I appreciate you asking that because obviously I care very much about what I offer. The way in which I would compare it to your experience, because there are definitely some apps that charge you to go on a Zoom call and you sort of watch each other. They're based in this idea of social facilitation theory, which is somewhat reductive to say it this way, but it is, there's a measurable productivity boost that you get when you can see someone else working as you're working, and you know that you can be seen. It's why study hall exists in college. It's nice to go down and work around other people.
It's
It's
like people on their laptops writing their novels in Starbucks in a cafe setting.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because the inspiration for me was this. It was very similar to what you said. When I was in West Hollywood, there is a famous coffee bean on Sunset Boulevard, just west of Fairfax, across from the Directors Guild. And it's known as this like writers clubhouse. And when you go in there, it's not incredibly social. People are not all like hanging out, chatting, reading each other's stuff. But you do walk in and everybody's sitting on their MacBooks, writing their TV pilot, their feature script. And I loved the energy of that room because it's true. In the corner, you had, the old guy who's written 3 studio movies last year. He's getting 1.5 million a script. But this is still his habit from when he was 25, 30 years old of doing this, right? And then on the other side, you got, 2 girls who just got off the bus from Iowa. They're writing their first TV pilot. right? On spec. And everyone in the room felt united in that they were all trying to do something great. They were trying to create something really cool. And there was an energy to that, even though it wasn't incredibly social energy. That was a mental model for me about how could a community exist that supported each other, right? More than just, oh, we're on a Zoom call for 20 minutes, like you said, with the bell. So what I thought was rather, there were a lot of established productivity techniques. Let me read what the smart people have written on the subject. Probably one of the most important things was Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book on flow, and talk about flow states, right? And I experienced that first on an airplane where there was no Wi-Fi, and I looked up. I was like, "How could we be landing? We just took off, and we'd been in the air for like 2 hours and 40 minutes, going, I think, Austin to San Francisco, and I had completely lost track of time." I had gotten a ton done. I was doing some designs for something. And I was just like, wow, this is almost done. Like, oh, wow, the bell went off. I have to put my laptop away. It's impossible. And in researching that and understanding that better, a lot of it was about being in a flow state. And Mihai's book, he named it Flow. And he talked a lot about, like, with high performers, there is this highly concentrated state where they can do their best work and they lose track of time. They, don't fidget. They don't, do random things, but they're very focused on the task. And he studied what are the conditions precedent that make that more available. It's a fantastic book, and tried to incorporate a lot of those principles into what we built, as well as like Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, where he talks about, hey, how do you really make time for, the work that moves your life forward? And what can you do to protect that time, jealously guard it? And if you do that, you can, in a fewer number of hours, do the work you used to do over a longer period of time if you do focused, deep work, right? So to contrast your experience of, hey, man, I was on a Zoom call, a bell went off, they charged me for 20 minutes of sitting there quietly with my, camera off and scrolling through Instagram. I'm not a huge fan of that, as much as I'm a fan of, we created a website that offers you, flow music designed to scientific best practices, 60 to 90 beats per minute, certain key signatures, non-vocal. There's like 1,000 hours of that. You can listen to rain, streams, surf, birds, lots of things that may be interesting to you, or even pink noise, binaural beats, brown noise, if you're into that. There's a smart assistant, as I mentioned, that sort of nurtures you along and keeps your task list groomed for you. There's timers, and they remind you to take breaks. Oh, go for a walk or have a glass of water, things like that, right? But the thing that I find so interesting is what you said about community, about the humanity of it. And I built into the platform a group chat where it's continuously open. When you're on break or you want to, you can drop in there, meet other people who are like-minded around the world who are trying to do something. You can drop into the task. When you finish one task a day, that's very important. You can drop it in there and it'll say, Eugene finished his blog post, in an hour and 15 minutes. People can ask you about it, and they do. They're like, oh, Eugene, drop a link to your blog post. I'd love to read it. You can drop emojis on it. You can talk to each other about techniques and things you've learned. And if you want to work with your camera on, you can do that. When I was conceiving of this feature, thinking, is this my crazy idea or is this a good idea? I was talking to some of our members and I said, hey, what would you think about this? And I think there's something that raises up just having the tools, but there being a community of people who use a tool. And this female member said to me something that really stuck with me and really encouraged me to launch this. She said, listen, I can go down to the Nike store and I can buy a pair of shoes. They will sell me a left shoe, a right shoe. I can put them on my feet. I can go for a run. It totally works, right? But there are over 110 million people that belong to the Nike Run Club. Because when you run together, you run further, you run faster, you're more accountable. The days that you need someone to, pick you up, be like, Eugene, come on, let's go do this. Let's go for a run today. You can make it. They're there for you. And the day that you can be there for someone else who needs you to do that, it feels great. And she's like, that's what I think is really wonderful about having a community around this, is that everyone here wants to do something with their life. This is not an Instagram club. This is not a TikTok club. This is a Focus App club. And I would love to be part of that energy. And I think that is what makes it more human. So that's something I'm really passionate about.
I love that you have that community aspect,
Hmm?
and that's
Yeah.
and even when you said that was, let's say, kind of like your thought process, you're like, oh, is this just like me going off on a tangent, or is it something that
Right.
I really want to implement here? Is this something that people are looking for?
Mhm.
Because a lot of times we get ideas like, oh, this would be a great product. It was like, yes, because it's coming from your head, but do people actually want this?
Will it really be a great product? I
Yes.
don't know, Puri.
But even in my space, when let's say being a high achiever, going into burnout, and when you're in that burnout loop, you disconnect from others. A lot of people just isolate because they
Mhm.
don't want people to see them at their lowest.
Yes,
And
that is very true.
that's where community comes in.
Yeah.
If people know it's like, look, you're not the only one feeling this way, you're not alone. There's ways you can work through this. There's things that can change. There's ways that you can improve. You can
Mhm.
10x your life. But you just need to look out for the warning signs. Break these behavioral patterns that are holding you back. And then you can move forward. If you have other people who are feeling the same way, or who have been through the same thing, who can help you along,
Yes.
it's
Uh,
it's exponential, the difference that makes. But people, again, you need to create these spaces, these communities,
mhm.
for people to experience that, so that they can be held accountable. So that's the one thing I love about when you mention the Sukha community.
I will tell you two funny stories. So in the group chat, one of our members said, "I'm so depressed today. I missed yesterday." And we have a streak counter. So if you work, during the week, I think if you work 4 days, you get credit for the whole week, right? He's like, "I had a 281-day streak going, and I forgot yesterday, or I was doing whatever." And he's like, "It's back to one." He's like, "I'm so depressed. I had this going. I was so proud of like the discipline I was showing. I was showing it for myself, right?" And a number of people in the chat were like, "Oh man, I've been there too. I'm back down to 8 or back to 13, whatever. I was 80 days, whatever." And that sense of camaraderie around something really reminded me a lot of that feeling of like being part of some athletic club. It's like, "Oh, I missed the gym today. I know, get back on the horse, do that sort of thing." And the other end of the spectrum, I think, is also very addictive in a positive way of addiction, which is there's a guy in the community who over the past year and a half, see him in there in the coffee shop, we call it. You see his little circle working nights, weekends. I know he's a vice principal somewhere in Missouri. He's been working on his PhD in engineering. So that's sort of his side hustle. And he uses our platform to get in there and focus and try and get it done in the time outside school. He posted in there his task for the day a couple weeks ago on Monday was, submit his dissertation. And a number of people are like, "Oh, that's great, man. We've seen you walking here. Congratulations." And he's like, "Great. I have to defend it, in 2 weeks' time or whatever it is." So that was like a week ago. And that weekend, there were people all over the world that I know. I run the platform. I know these people do not know him. They don't live in the same city. They're not. We're posting the group chat like, "Hey, Monday, Roy, you got this, man. You've been working so hard." It was so great to see that many people be like, like going out to the Boston Marathon or something, like, "Eugene, you've been training for this. You got this. You're so good." And then on Monday, after all these posts, he was quiet, right? And he's off, and everyone's like, "I wonder how it's going. I wonder, what's happening with him." And Tuesday morning, his first post of the day was he said, "You can now call me Dr. King." And people just like, we're so happy and just have that outpouring of support for someone that I know they don't know. It is a renewal of that belief in humanity, where it's like, I don't have any particular benefit from cheering you on or being there for you, but I want good things for you. And I want to create a place where that can happen. And by the way, the root, if you actually dig down in Sanskrit, Sukha, Su is the Sanskrit root for good, and Ka is for place. Sukha means good place. And that's very meaningful to me. Words have power.
So it's like the good place.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you said good place, I just thought of, is it the TV show, The Good Place? Are you
Oh, really?
familiar? Yeah.
I've not seen that one.
Okay,
No,
okay,
no,
okay. Maybe you can check it out, but definitely a completely different thing.
no. Noted. The same yet different.
Same name, but completely different thing. But
It's
that's
like
what I love.
Breaking Bad for focus.
Yeah.
Really?
But that's what I love about the community, is that it's not everyone coming from the same backgrounds. It's not everyone, oh, everyone here is an engineer. Oh, everyone here is a
What
lawyer.
is your favorite community of the communities to which you belong? Which is the one that holds you up, that you feel most bonded to?
Which community?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I guess it's changed over time. It started off. I joined the fitness community during lockdown, very big, because well, there wasn't much I could do. I had to do, let's say, body weight workouts at home. Everyone was kind of online as well, and there was lots of Zoom calls around body weight fitness and things. At the moment, it's I'm in a podcasting community.
How cool.
And yes, and what I love is like, I'm like, okay, there's some people and they're 100 steps ahead of me, but we're all in the same group, and they're having similar challenges, just 100x the challenge of what I'm going through right now. But it's still a challenge. And it's like, look, I can relate to where you are in your journeys. They're like, yeah, you'll get through this and all this. And that's uplifting. It's not like saying, oh, I'm 100 leagues ahead of you, don't bother me.
Right.
There's still that energy of, let's say, just the spirit of, I've been through that, you'll get through that, don't worry about it, just, put your head down, get the work done, don't worry about A, B, and C. And that's what I loved, that positive aspect. And another part of it is that they're not trying to flood as many people into the community as possible. They're like, no, we want people who, let's say, screen them for, they're coming in with the right intentions. They're coming in and they want to have a positive influence on others. They want to help others in the group and share where you are in your journey. Be honest and be open where you are, because if you're going to come in and say, oh yes, tick, 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 yes, got all my tasks done, tick, tick, tick every day, but you're not actually doing the work, then you're only fooling yourself. Whereas if you come in and say like, look, okay, I have 3 tasks for today, I only got 1 done. Okay, I accidentally found myself scrolling through TikTok for 20 minutes or 2 hours or whatever. Once you're open about it,
we're judging about TikTok, you know that.
TikTok is literally borderline of being deleted from my phone. I mute all notifications. The app is there. It's just my partner likes to send me videos on TikTok, and she's like, "Look, I'm sending them to you to save them so you can look at them later. They're like recipes or something." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. That's what I go to TikTok for."
Fair enough.
I cannot scroll through TikTok. It's just like pure brain rot for me.
Yeah.
For me, it's scrolling through LinkedIn, in fact. And I kind of, in a way, justify it, that I'm like, look, it's not as bad as doom scrolling Instagram or doom scrolling TikTok. I'm going through LinkedIn. And
it could be worse.
Still, it could be so much worse. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, I've wasted 20 minutes, not even interacting with other people, but just scrolling through content. And that's the mindless wasting of time. But then I'm like, look, instead of mindlessly wasting 20 minutes, I'm like, look, if I scroll past a post, I'm liking it and I'm commenting on it or reposting or sharing some thoughts or connecting with one person in the comments. And then it's not so much a waste of time. And then because it requires more efforts to make a comment, I'm more mindful of my time also. So I tend to stop after 20 or 30 minutes.
Right. It is good to be this considered with things. So tell me, what else do you think would be interesting for your audience? What else should we talk about?
Is there anything about the TheSukha community that I've missed?
I think you've captured really well. It's a bunch of nice, productive people who want to be focused and support each other. I'm very proud of it. And,
But with the launch of, as you said, TheSukha 2.0, what's changing in TheSukha 2.0 that was not in the first?
Faster, like the way in which it's written is much more efficient. So that's a plus. The Smart Assistant is smarter now and really helps you get stuff done, starts to see your patterns. One of the things I was beta testing this morning is just that it sees over time. It's like, oh, Steven, you know what? In the mornings, you're really better doing this kind of work. Why don't we budget time for that? Or, you know what? You seem to work best to this playlist. Why don't you listen to Sonic Caffeine instead of Ambient Atmosphere or something like that? Just those little things where you go, oh, this is actually a value add. Like, it's like having a great assistant around who's there to just be like, how can I help you be 1% better today? Or make your life 1% easier. So it's little things like that,
So you have, as a community, you have the music, you have the AI assistant, and you have the, as you said, the Pomodoro, the timer.
The timers, exactly, which you can customize. Yes. Like I do 55 and 5. Pomodoro traditionally is 25 and 5. with one longer pause later. That works better for me. And we help you have healthy breaks. Like when your break comes up, oh, here's a 60-second breathing video. You know what? Why don't we just breathe together for a little bit? It helps, or go get a glass of water, or hey, do you want to stretch at your desk? Which I definitely do. Like by the time I do yoga, which is usually in the evening, I will have wanted to have stretched earlier in the day. I can't go until like 6 o'clock and not have done something. So I kind of love just taking 60 seconds, being like, okay, you know what? This is a great moment to stop, stretch, feel better, get back to it.
And when that 60-second timer, let's say, comes up for the breathing or the stretch, is that like compulsory that it's like, okay,
No,
this is a block? Okay,
no.
it's something that somebody can just skip it if they want.
Yeah.
But it's just like a reminder. I suppose it kind of gets you out of that lapse of, let's say, where you're in deep work, and next thing your productivity or focus is just like dwindling over time. And next thing is like, no, okay, this kind of snaps you back to reality, and it's like, oh, okay, something is taking my attention away from that downward spiral or that doom scroll I've been on, and brings my attention back to the work I should be doing. Okay, am I going to take 60 seconds to breathe? Or am I going to do the work? And if it gets you back doing the work rather than the doom scroll, then that's a good thing for me.
I love you work the doom scrolling into there. I will say this: there is some neuroscience, some research around the fact that your brain fuel, your glucose levels, definitely after like about 90 minutes of concentrated thought, they start to drop, and you start to have that feeling of like, oh, I need a break. I'm running out of gas, right? It's one of the things that we encourage, which is that after 120 minutes, we encourage you just to take a break, period, just to stop, let your brain, recharge, do something else for a little bit. To be surprised how much more effective you are when you come back with some gusto. And something else you said a moment ago is, when I was producing films, there are certain genre delights that we would call them delights. For example, if you're really into horror movies, there are certain beats that you want to have happen, and they're just delicious to you, or they're done well. It's like, oh, and this is where the monster is revealed, or this is the first time you see, the dark ceiling and a single drop of water come down that shouldn't be coming down. And it's the foreshadowing of, oh my God, the water creatures upstairs, whatever it is, right? Romantic comedy. There are delights about, oh, how clever was the meet cute in this movie? Action movie. How well did you set up, that the hero is able to do this thing that will end up being the heroic act in the third act. And so those things we call delights. And how well do you deliver the delights? Because often with film, the trailer is a promise. It's a contract you make with the audience to say, you know what? If you come and give us your money, you will feel this emotion. And if you deliver on that promise, that contract for that emotion, say you will believe in love, or you will, feel this thing, people will actually forgive a lot of flaws. They'll forgive bad dialogue, or, oh, I don't know, the sets weren't great, or the lighting was. If they walk out there and they go, I absolutely feel the thing I wanted to feel, right? And that to me is very interesting, because that translates in my mind into technology, where you sort of say like, oh, you know what? There is definitely a set of things you can do in the user experience to say, this is a delightful thing. And that's what we aspire to with TheSukha, is to say, this is full of delights. We care about you, as opposed to we're disciplinarian. It's not like we will slap your knuckles if you do this, and thou are a bad person. If you do not do this breathing exercise, you're bad. It's more like, here's some options. Choose one or don't. Enjoy.
I was expecting, you had the hands out there. I was expecting a red pill, blue pill Morpheus moment. I was just like, oh, wow. What options are you going to give?
Right. Here we come. Good film reference.
Steve, that was brilliant. Absolutely love that. And if anyone is looking to join Sukha, you probably have the website. Much better. I don't have it on hand right now. It's definitely going to show notes, but it's TheSukha.co.
Yeah, TheSukha.co, the Sukha company, SUKHATHESUKHA.co. And also mention that if someone is looking for a great tool and they find something else that works for them, that makes me equally happy. There are some fantastic products out there. If you're listening to music, like Brain FM is really good, Endel is really good. There are so many things out there that can help you. Find the one that works for you. If you choose ours, 7 days, no credit card, just for free. See if you like it. It's a something we want to make sure is the people who join the community really love what we do. And if you even have a question, you don't even want to sign up. You're just like, oh, Steven, you mentioned Cal Newport, or you mentioned Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, or you mentioned the blog post. Email me, Steven@TheSukha.co. Happy to reply and be like, oh, here's a link to that thing. Maybe it helps you. I won't write you back a 19-paragraph story of my life. Don't have time for that, but I do make every attempt to return my emails in 24 hours if I'm not sick or traveling.